3, 2, 1, record. Here we go. Global shipping, imports, what's going on with the Red Sea? How does it impact you? And so much more today on Data Day. Well, here we go. Now, y'all might not recognize the gentleman on the bottom of the screen here, just so everybody knows, that is Jeff Dickinson, aka the Bodacious Cowboy, except it's his younger brother by about 20 years. So we're happy to have him on today. I've already dug myself a hole with it. So I'll just move on from there, gents.
That's funny.
But Jeff, I have to say, I love the new look, brother.
Thank you, my man.
You blew me away with the fact that, just by simply shaving some hair on your face, you took a good 20 years off of your age category, which I think is spectacular. You're getting back towards that old picture you used to have of you with the cowboy hat as your LinkedIn profile. You're getting really close to that, brother. So I like it. I like it.
Thank you.
And that's all I'll say about it, because Dean says I'm digging a hole.
And I lost a lot of weight by shaving it off.
Yes, that's it. I bet. Yeah. Well, that DR mower is probably really dull now, so you got to go sharpen that bad boy up.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So much stuff going on in the country, huh, guys? Right now, it's unbelievable.
Surprises. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's the biggest surprise for you guys that's happening right now?
Ooh, for me, I would think probably the Red Sea, I would think right now, just because of the enormous disruptions and I mean, to the supply chain for those, who have those lanes coming into the States. I mean, it's going to set a few things back quite a bit.
Mine, Dan, is, before we dive into that, mine is that how global affairs haven't impacted diesel prices. Normally, when you see global geopolitical risk of the level that we've seen, there's generally a premium built into crude prices. Then diesel goes up, like it just keeps dropping. Like it's down another 4 cents this week. I'm just shocked by that. But
I got an answer for you, Dean.
What's that?
And I don't like bringing politics, but this is an election year.
Right.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. So mine is actually fuel. But mine was, we never see fuel prices drop in winter. They always go up.
Right.
And for me, and don't get me wrong, I know it's been for most of us I mean, I saw a picture of Whistler last night. There's literally one run open. And typically Whistler has 5-6 feet of snow by now. So I know in Canada, our winter has been very mild. But even with that, there's normally a massive increase just as soon as it gets cold, because more people are using oil or heat to heat their home, or propane or natural gas. And I'm blown away. Like, fuel keeps dropping. And don't get me wrong, for everybody out there, I think this is good for suppliers that are just hanging on, because I think it's the only thing keeping a lot of people in the game right now is the fact that fuel is not high.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I didn't think of the geopolitical side of it as well. So you got the winter and the geopolitical side, which seemed like it just doesn't. Yeah. And then, Jeff, you make a very valid point with election year. So many things change in election year. So, wow.
Well, you think about this too. We have this strategic fuel dumps, that are stockpiled. And in an election year, they always tap into it, to keep those fuel rates down, prices. And what I'm worried about is after the election, to be perfectly honest with you, because you know what happens. I mean, it's so predictable. Everything changes once the votes are in. Everything changes. So
you mean to tell me that?
No, I don't mean to tell you anything.
Word. Are you serious? You politicians are like weather reporters. They can be wrong every day and still keep their job. Is that real?
It's pretty predictable, though.
Oh,
they really
I'm gonna have to check Facebook to verify that information.
So truck drivers out there, start budgeting yourself, for the election. Then what happens after it? You're gonna need some cash.
I was on one was on with Ellen Voyer on Women in Trucking on New Year's Eve on the Sirius XM show, and she asked a question about the election, and I said, what do you think will be the big impact this year? And I said, well, politics aside, I think the biggest challenge we'll face this year is AI-generated false information and trying to discern what's right and what's wrong, what's true, what's false. I think we're about to see an unprecedented level of BS come across all social media platforms that it's going to be very hard for a lot of folks who, maybe are susceptible to not being able to see what's real and what's not.
Gullible.
I think a lot of folks are going to be bombarded with stuff, and it's going to appear real, and it's going to influence a lot of decision making this year on a level that we've never seen before. That's what I'm already seeing it.
Yeah,
seeing signs of it, and that's what I said to her. I said that'll be our biggest challenge for truckers, in particular, who take a lot of information in through social media, who are isolated, who are on their own most of the time, and tend to form opinions, based on a fairly limited data set. I think that's going to be a real challenge this year, and maybe that's just a sign of the times to come because of the way that artificial intelligence is driving a lot of our information source.
So can I add to that, Dean?
Please do.
Yeah.
So with the now use of clone AI people,
Yep.
Uploading us, I was watching one of a really serious guy in the AI space, because I follow this to a T, right? Obviously, I want as much AI in my life as possible to help me get done what I need to get done in a shorter period of time. But he was saying the big switch that everyone's going to have to really watch out for is when video no longer becomes proof. And this to me is probably the scariest part, because if you look at all court cases, like everything we do, it's like, well, there's cameras everywhere. Somebody's got it on film in a very short period of time. And he was talking 12 to 24 months.
Oh, really?
He says, you're no longer going to be able to believe video in certain aspects. He says, because already deep fakes. I mean, you saw it even just when Trump came in 2016 and Obama left, there was deep fakes of Obama that were pretty good, talking trash about Russia and all this kind of crap. Right. But he says they're getting to the point where it is very, like, you have to be an expert in order to tell a difference. Now, right now, you can still tell a difference because of the facial animation and that kind of stuff. But it's becoming to a point, like, if you look at DALL-E 3, DALL-E's an image generator, prompt image generator. If you look at it from the start of 2023 to now, it is leaps and bounds better. Like leaps and bounds, to the point where it's portraits where you would swear this is somebody's taken a picture and then, added a filter or done some Photoshop to it, but still the element of a picture. And he was saying it's going to turn where it's not even real on video. And to me, that's probably the scariest part, because we've been trained to learn that video is real. You see an accident, you see somebody, call somebody out. I mean, you look at, just go back to politics for a second, right? You want to trash any politician, you put out a video of them saying something that's inappropriate, that just happened to be caught, right? Somebody's doing an illegal activity, the video that somebody captures, that could be doctored, that could be, and now all of a sudden, what's reality and what's not when it comes to video? That to me is probably the scariest part of it.
Another thing too, tail of the tape, and I'm sure that you've received it with DMs that are coming into your inbox into LinkedIn, right? When you see an Asian chick with the name Bob Ample, come on. I mean, that's not real. I mean, how many times do you see that on a daily basis? All AI driven, I mean, a friend of mine said to me this, that you can use AI to get information, but before you take that information and send it out, make sure you read about it to make sure what is being said by AI is accurate, because it's garbage in and garbage out. So what it's actually seeing, it might be delayed, or it's it's creating its own algorithm and words to fill in, which isn't necessarily true. So he said, always, if you're writing something to speed up something, always have a second look at it to see how accurate it is, because a lot of times it's not.
So here's another thing that you guys might want to think about. I was speaking to yesterday. I was doing my sales, and as you know, I'm a big email guy when it comes to sales.
Yeah.
And I sent this individual a message, and he replied back to me and said, "Sure, let's set up a call." So we set up a call, and we're having a conversation. I said, "If you don't mind me asking," at the end of the conversation, I said, "If you don't mind me asking, what made you, like, what in the email that I sent you made you want to set up a call?" He goes, "Well, I knew you typed it out." I said, "How did you know that?" And he says, "Because my name is JT." He says, "But everywhere I put a capital J and a small t, you used a capital T and a capital J." So he says, "I can immediately tell when somebody's using like a duck Zoom or whatever they call it, like an automated LinkedIn message."
Like the Dragon app or something.
Yeah, like Duck Soup or well, no, Dragon's a dictating app, but like Duck Soup is a platform
Duck Soup too,
where you plug in your LinkedIn and you go to Navigator and you enter the URL of your search Navigator and you just hit a button and it goes and connects with all these people. So what he said is, he says, what I do is I like, maybe I won't capitalize my last name, or I won't capitalize the first letter of my first name. So his name is JT. So he has a capital J and a small t. And it's not really the way JT is spelled, right? When you send it to capital J and capital T. He goes, so I immediately delete any email or anything that comes in, because we have sequencing in our emails and all this, where you can write a template, use the person's first name as a short code and do it. And he says, so I constantly monitor those. And he goes, and if any email comes in, I don't care how good the email is written, I know it wasn't written by, it might have been written by a human at one point, but I'm on an automated sequence. It goes, done. So something for everybody to think about.
Yeah.
Changing one little parameter in your name.
That's amazing.
Can actually, you know, and AI right now can't differentiate between, should that be capitalized? Should it not? Do I you know what I mean? It's using a snippet of code based on the system you're using. So whatever system that is, Instantly, Bridger, whatever, you know, HubSpot, whatever, in your templates, if you're using first name, to all you salespeople out there, a little bit of a hack, make sure to go in and make sure all your contacts are spelled properly. Right. He says he has a buddy that says he actually changes 2 letters in his name. And he goes, and he knows immediately when somebody's using some automated system. So interesting. Just thought of that right when you started.
Another thing to follow up on that, you know, you mentioned, you know, JT. If you're dictating or saying something to AI, JT to an AI would mean JAYTEA, because they can't differentiate between a letter J and a letter T. So they hear JT and they figure J is the first name, JAY, T is the last name, TEA. So that's a gimme too. I see that a lot as well. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but
I haven't. I mean, it's typically, hey Dan. I mean, I've had the usual where somebody sent me a LinkedIn request, and I typically wait till 6 or 7 times for them messaging me on LinkedIn or any platform before I even reply. And I do it specifically because if I'm going to work with somebody, I'm going to work with somebody that goes beyond the 5-step point, because most salespeople give up after 5. So, but what I also watch out for is like the copy and paste. So perfect example, somebody sent me 6 messages. On the 6th message, I said, hey, got all your messages. Thanks for sending 6. You've kind of passed my test 1. I'm thinking about setting up an appointment with you. What can we do next? And all of a sudden it came back, hey, Judith, this is the next step in appointment setting. And I'm like, okay. So I sent the message back saying, my name's not Judith. And he sent one back saying, oh, typo. I'm like, bullshit. It's not a typo. You don't misspell Dan with Judith, you fucking dumbass. Excuse my language. I'm like, don't give me that shit. So, but immediately I'm like, forget it. Not interested. You can't even take the time to get my name right. And trust me, guys, I've done it, which is why I see it, because I've done it. Don't get me wrong. Beginning of 2023, when I first started working again, it was like mass email out to the masses. And I got to personalize it. Names, really do. Pasted the template and forgot to change one of their names. I've done it. I know what it is. But it's like immediately I'm like, come on, man. Like, come back to me and say, sorry, dude, this was a template. I'm on my phone. Whatever. Don't come back to me and say Judith is a typo for Dan. right? That's like if your name's Richard and I call you Dick,
Yeah.
right? Like, come on. Yeah, you know, like, I mean, I get it. That
You want to talk to a sales guru? Go to Judith Deigan.
Yes, that's it. But that's it, right? So to me, it's kind of like, come on, man. Like, just own up. Tell me what you know, like, hey man, sorry, this was a template. You know, you caught me. I didn't, and I would have probably been like, dude, been there before. Let's have a chat anyways. But because they tried to cover it up with some bullshit story, I was like, no, not a chance.
Yeah, imagine that going out to a multi-million. Yeah, imagine that going out to a multi-million-dollar prospect, and you pull that kind of crap on them. You just lost your chances. You just blew it out of the water. Done.
Yeah, because Jeff, think about it. Their credibility just went down the toilet. I'm like, okay,
right down the
you're
shitter.
Trying to get me as a customer and you're lying to me. What the heck's gonna happen once you have my money? Right? Like you were saying, politics. You're all about this until the votes come in. Once the votes are in,
that's
it, window, brother. You know what I'm saying?
Shit goes out the window, man.
Yeah.
Real quick.
I don't think we touched on anything logistics in the first 16 minutes.
Well, I think this is the funniest 16 minutes I've had all year.
I know, this is awesome. This is awesome. Great. This is what a real show is about.
I actually learned a lot from listening to Dan talk about technology and emails, and I didn't realize you could do all that search engine stuff with.
Yeah.
So I've created a couple of different tools. I'm really diving into like Python coding and JSON coding and stuff, because I've got it to the point where I can enter certain things on a spreadsheet and then use APIs and ChatGPT to enhance the data, double check the data, give me the sources of the data and everything. So my workflows are becoming tighter and tighter. The systems I'm setting up are becoming tighter and tighter. So I'm like on this huge kick to figure it out, because I do want, and don't get me wrong, right? The personalization, the ability to understand what you're writing when you're writing, but the ability to automate a lot of tasks. Right. How do we get the information we want as fast as possible? So I'll give you one example. Inside Bridger, I created an AI chatbot. This AI chatbot combs the websites that I tell it to comb specifically, no other websites. And then based on those websites, you ask a question and it'll pull data. So like Dean, it's combing DAT. So if somebody says, well, what's the trend lines? It'll pull up your blog post on trend lines from 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. And it'll say, here's a blog post from DAT about trend lines. You should probably read it. And then they click on it. So what it is it's an internal, in essence, I'm creating this internal Google engine that's specific to logistics. So it takes out all the fluff and all the bullshit from any other website that, you know, like perfect example is like generic CRM websites that try and talk about logistics and supply chain, where you read it and you're like, okay, that's very general. This is specific, right? So what we're doing is we're eliminating the fluff and getting down to the nitty gritty, but providing sources. So if a customer's in Bridger and says, just had a conversation with a customer, they were asking about this, you can ask the AI bot about it and it'll pull up details from DAT that says, here it is. So you can literally take that link, send it right to your prospect and say, hey, listen, while we were on the call, you asked about this. Here was a really cool article I found on DAT for you, but you do it in 10 seconds instead of combing through DAT. Go, you know what I mean? So it's a shortening that system to get the information to people that want to get it. And this is what I'm focusing on 2024. How do you shorten that? How do you get people the information that they want right away? And I mean, I'm even like with a lot of my students, I'm saying, you know, this is what's working right now. Try it. And one of my students yesterday had a call with her at 1 o'clock. By 3 o'clock, she had 4 meetings set up for today. Just by using this whole new system and just by saying, here, like, this is what it is. This is really what I'm looking for. Like, go in with your superpower, go in with a very direct message, one point of entry. And all of a sudden she has 4 meetings set up. She's been working all of November and December to set up meetings. Nothing's really happened. And then all of a sudden, but it's because people are listening to different messages. So, you know, and this is the whole thing for me anyways, with AI is how can I use it to get better at what I'm doing, to streamline my actions, to automate some events. So for example, I have my Trello connected with Squadcast. When we pre-record episodes, it's connected. I've created an API to talk to each other. As soon as I hit end on Squadcast, it finds that title in Trello and moves the card for me to the next location.
Wow.
Because we've recorded the show. So then all of a sudden it moves it to the next location. It cancels script out. It cancels recording out. When I import it from Trello to Premiere Pro tells it to move it to the next thing. So now all of a sudden it's moved to edit it. So, and as much as it's just click and drag, it's just one less thing I need to do when I go in and look at my production and my visual calendar for what needs to be done, what needs to be edited. So I've set up all these automations through Zapier, through all these other channels. And it takes, like, for everybody watching this, it takes a bit to learn, obviously.
Sure.
So I spent probably 4 hours learning, but in November, I probably gained 7 hours of productivity.
Right.
Because I just didn't have to do certain things. So I've already gained back, in my opinion, I've gained back 3 hours of my time just setting this up properly. And that for me is what AI is good for. That for me is what automation is good for. Like, I've got specific prompts that I built a tool inside Relevance where I literally say, this is a topic. I've inserted the tool with about 14 of the blog posts I've wrote. So it understands my style, my conceptual strategy, how my words are upbeat, motivational. And then I can just say, I want a thing on this topic. Here's my basic outline. And it'll print up a 25-page article for me. I'll grab that article, I'll put it into my editor, I'll review it, and I'll just like change a few words, change a few things, say, no, I don't agree with this one. This is the way I think it should roll. So I go from, 2 hours to write a blog post to probably 25, 30 minutes. But that's awesome. An hour and a half saving, which is a really good time. And it's all done in my style and my voice.
Right.
It just gives me suggestions. And I'll be honest with you, probably 60% of the suggestions I never use because I'm like, and again, this comes with experience, right? If you're going to write about this industry, you got to write about it through your experience, right? As opposed to just general information. Otherwise, you become a general wanderer instead of like the general logistics specific, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? I talk about this a lot, as everybody knows. Working smarter, not harder. And what you save today multiplies that time tomorrow. And that's how you gain that extra time to really focus in on what's really important. This is what's not important, which will start feeding your pipeline. Like Dan's saying, he's saving 3 hours today, but if he did the same thing tomorrow, right? And he didn't have to do it. He just gained 6 hours times 5 is 30 hours of extra time in a whole week, or 120 for the month. Well over 1,000 hours of extra. And you divide that by 40, you gain all these weeks of productivity on things that you should be doing and not be doing. It's fantastic.
You see, I wanted to write a blog post every Tuesday and Thursday. And I wanted to start this in August. And from August, I was averaging one a week, if that, just because time. And I'm like, you start writing it and then you lose.
Now you're up to 3, right?
This isn't really the point I want to get across. And so with this process and my ability to prompt it and give me something that I can now edit, I'm like, bang, man, we're golden, people. Like, now it's just a matter of, Dean, I'll take some of your blogs, I'll put it in, I'll show you the prompts, and I'll spit it back out, and I'll show you what it can come to. I think you'll be super impressed, because even if it's just a starting point, if it can shave 30 minutes a week off of your time, that's 2.5 weeks of productivity added to your end of your year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get into what's happening in the world. Dean, you're up. Fire away.
25 minutes in, not a single talk about the actual data.
All right.
I'm throwing you a fastball. Let's do this.
We started the show talking about what surprised us the most. I was really surprised that December imports went up, only up about 4 to 5%, not a huge number, but I was surprised they were up. I thought they'd go down. Some of the other economists that I talked to yesterday were surprised as well. Even more surprised that Houston's volumes were up, and I'll quickly pull it up for you, up 34% month over month. So, and you think, okay, so why, if the Panama Canal has got so many restrictions and 40% of our imports come in through the Panama Canal, And we said on the show a month ago that Houston volumes were down, and we surmised that was because of the reduction in capacity through the Suez Canal, because the depth of vessels has gone from 50 feet to 40 feet, maybe. So it's a big reduction in capacity, a lot of congestion. So where did the volume come from, was my thought. And I read a really good article this morning by Greg Miller on FreightWaves, who's probably the best dry bulk and ocean journalist, certainly at FreightWaves. There's some really good ones at Journal of Commerce also. But he said something that was very interesting, because he said it was counterintuitive. And he said that container vessels that traditionally use the Panama Canal to bring Asian goods to the eastern Gulf Coast, this is in November, switched to the Suez Canal. And those ships then rerouted from the Suez Canal to longer voyages around the Cape of Good Hope because of the Red Sea crisis and the Houthi rebels. That diversion around the Cape of Good Hope started in late November and accelerated in recent weeks.
Yes.
So that's why December volumes picked up again into Houston and the East Coast, is because of the rerouting of vessels. For those that listened to Lars Jensen on Monday talk about global sea trade, he said as of Monday morning, nearly all ocean container ships were going around the Cape of Good Hope. Suez Canal represents about 30% of containerized shipping volume. So it's a significant detour for ships. It adds another 9 to 12 days. But here's the thing that he mentioned. He said it absorbs about 6% of global capacity, the extra transit time. But he said the point is we've got plenty of capacity to absorb it. So that doesn't mean that rates haven't gone up. They have, but it meant that even with the longer transit times, there was time for volumes to pick up in Houston, which was counterintuitive.
Yeah, you know what? I have some interesting facts here for you, Dean, as well. The number of container vessels that have been rerouted via the Cape of Good Hope due to the Red Sea crisis has risen to 354 units, 4.65 million TEUs, or 16.4% of the global fleet.
Wow.
Just think about that.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Wow. Yeah.
That's massive. And now think about all the companies out there and the impact from this disruption and what that's going to cause, not just for them, but the end user being you, me, and everybody else that relies on this product. And then it's not available because it's pushed out 7, 12, 15 days or even more. That's big.
Well, New York volumes were up 12%. Again, surprisingly, Los Angeles volumes are down about 5%. Long Beach.
But is that surprising, though, Dean? If they're rerouting things to the East Coast instead of the West Coast, would you not think the West Coast would go down?
Yeah, I thought the opposite would happen, Dan. I honestly thought that we would have seen more trans-Pacific freight out of Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia come direct into Los Angeles. It is normally, though, you see a drop-off in volume in December anyway, right? Yes. Nationally. So I think part of this could be, I went back and looked at Houston, October, November, and December volumes, and it's V-shaped. So part of this could be just a return to normal. So the month-over-month comps could be a little bit misleading. So it's something we've got to watch. I do hold with my prediction that longer-term West Coast volumes will increase over time once volumes start to pick up after Chinese New Year, right? Because I think that's going to be, I think we'll still have low truckload rates, low intermodal rates. So moving all of that imports off the West Coast to Chicago, Kansas City, Dallas will still remain a viable option for shippers. And that's why I think, even though long-haul truckload capacity is disappearing out of the market, I think what will happen is rates will tighten on the West Coast for inland moves in particular. There's just less trucks in the market. There's less trucks that, the old-fashioned diesel engines on the West Coast. There's fewer long-haul operators that want to run to California. Sure. So I think capacity is going to tighten there. There's no question about that. But some of the highlights around the data for December, 4% higher year over year. I went back and looked at all of the Decembers back to 2015. Last December was 5% higher than the average over the last 8 years. That translates to about 100,000 more containers per month, or about 40,000 more truckloads of freight, the equivalent of last December versus December going back 8 years. So more freight is coming in. When you look at the trend line where it sits relative to prior years, it's higher than 2019, a little bit lower than 2018. So again, kind of fits the pattern of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But Houston was the really big surprise for us. I'm totally shocked by that. But remember, this is we're heading into Chinese New Year. That's an important point for people. That, it is the quiet season. It's on
so
February.
People might be pushing forward freight, you mean?
Well, could be, but I think what will happen though, Dan, is that the Chinese New Year is on February 10 to 16, but the 16, this year the celebrations will last up to 16 days, but only 7 of those are around the holiday. Just very quickly for those that don't know, the factory shut down during Chinese New Year. A lot of families live in rural communities in China, so a lot of workers go home. The idea of shutting down for 3 weeks, a week either side of Chinese New Year, is to allow families to regroup and travel. It's also a time when you see high levels of turnover in factories because people go home and don't come back. So there's also that. Yeah. But the process of shutting down the manufacturing, remember about 46% of our imports come from China each month. Almost that much comes into Los Angeles, Long Beach. So it impacts volumes in March. They typically dip down in March and then they come back up. Remember, it's a 3-week transit schedule, 21 days from Shanghai to Los Angeles. So even though the factories will reopen, sometime in late February, it takes about 3 weeks for that volume to start to arrive in significant volumes.
And it's going to come in hot.
Yeah, so that was one of the other things is you'll start to see a surge in volume because if you looked at Zach Rogers' LMI report this week, he said that the LMI is a diffusion index, so above 50 is expansion, below 50 is contraction. It hit 50.6 in December. But what he did say, and he confirmed what he thought in November, is that just-in-time freight has returned. Shippers are getting back to more normal order inventory cycles after being on a roller coaster for the last few years. So I thought that was good news. As the inventory sort of levels dissipate, people get back to more normal ordering cycles. That tells us that maybe we'll start to see more normal ordering cycles this year and maybe more seasonality. It may turn out to be a fairly boring year without too much volatility. So that's where, sorry, Jack.
Go ahead, Dean. Sorry, that's where what?
No, I just wanted to sort of wrap up and say that December imports were up. Just surprised everybody going against trend, but that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us because there's been so many surprises in the market in the last few years. But we're starting off in pretty good shape. And I say that because it looks and feels like a lot of the upheaval that the pandemic caused 3 years ago has started to work its way out of the market. It's still working its way out. I won't say it's done, but the things that disrupted the market seem to be working their way out.
Good.
So I'm wondering, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but is it possible that with all the challenges in the Red Sea, with the increased transit time, with Chinese New Year, these factors are coming into play for the increase in ocean freight coming in, where people are saying, well, we better order even earlier because now we've got Chinese New Year dealing with, plus the Red Sea adds an extra 2 weeks transit. Right. So is that maybe what would have been ordered in January was ordered in December, knowing this? Like, is there any correlation with that?
I wouldn't think so.
No, I don't think so, Dan. I think we've still got, I don't think so. I still think that when volumes start to pick up, the ocean carriers got plenty of capacity. Don't forget, they always blank schedules and park capacity and
that's true.
Fill their vessels, right? So it's a little bit different to truckload. So no, I don't think so. I think the longer term play is still shippers are still very wary of the ILA agreement on the East Coast that's due in September, the labor agreement on the West Coast. I think that's a factor. Reduced capacity in the Panama Canal. When demand picks up, the longer transit schedule could become an issue because it's going to be, the rates will be higher. That may mean that the West Coast becomes favorable to the East Coast. We've got to watch TEU rates there. So I think, Dan, my instinct is the West Coast is still going to be the place where a lot more imports are going to gravitate towards to, which is where I think the truckload rates will start to see the most movement this year in a year that looks fairly flat. There's not a lot of demand signals that will move the needle significantly this year in truckload, but I do think the West Coast will move more than most because of the ocean factors. Ocean imports account for about 10% of truckload demand, but a lot more on the West Coast, where half of our imports land in that 4 or 5 acres around the San Pedro port complex, Metroplex. So port complex, I think they call it. So that's why I'm watching that particular market. Los Angeles, Ontario freight markets are about 5% of the spot market volume every week. So the fact that then they are tied at the hip to imports. So I think that's where I'd be watching. Most of
and then also you got what we talked about at the beginning of the show with all these different weird weather patterns coming through, and like cold fronts coming through, possible polar vortexes coming through. I mean, it literally could be a week and everything's changed, right? And
so
it's all of a sudden now
we didn't see the polar vortex in 2021 February.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, lots of things could happen. I mean, I-80's shut right now. I think 90's shut up in the Dakotas. That people are buried in snow. So there's all sorts of weather factors. I read on LoadLink yesterday that they're seeing some movement in refrigerated spot rates in Canada because of weather. So people are using Protect from Freeze on. So we
went from like beautiful weather to like out in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, Alberta, and all that to drastic freeze. Like
you know what's would be devastating. I mean, with everything that we're talking about and where we are in the beginning of the year, this is like the perfect storm if everything came together at once. When you talk about the weather and the disruptions and supply chain disruptions coming all in at the same time. I mean, it's all bad, but I mean, the probability of a lot of that happening at the same time is high. It is high. It's very, very high. So I think the biggest question, and I don't think any one of us can answer it, is what are you doing to prepare for the worst case scenario? And it's unpredictable. And I think that's what you really got to look at in supply chain logistics, is those what ifs and how are you going to respond? What's the plan B, man? What are you going to do when literally the shit hits the fan? Because there's such a high probability. I mean, that's the biggest question.
But when that happens, you need good relationships, right, Jeff, with your suppliers. So
that's one of them.
And your customers.
It's communication and letting them know before it happens and how high the predictability of it happening. So if something happens, don't be surprised. I already forewarned you. This is what we're doing. Prepare for the worst. Understand it might, impact your inventory, what you have on hand, what's going out. Your back orders, all different kinds of stuff, because all this affects that, and a lot of people don't understand that. It's much more complex than what we're talking about right here. And you've got to look at those things. It's so critical.
I think this is going to be, we know that long haul capacity is exiting the market. So there's fewer truckload carriers. We saw in the new truck orders that Class 8 truck orders were down about 35% in December. But there was significant growth in vocational trucks and demand in Mexico. So I'm waiting for my friends at ACT Research to tell me. But if that's the case, then you start to see fewer long haul Class 8 trucks coming into the market. That makes sense because large truckload carriers are reducing capacity, and a higher growth in short haul regional day cab trucks. Which again fits where we've been talking about demand being in that final mile warehouse to retailer space. That all fits right now. So you've got to be looking at this market. I think there's been a fundamental shift in this market because of what the pandemic's done. That may be one of them, is that we're actually starting to see less demand in long haul freight over time. On our show last week, I said that our freight pie is shrinking, and the slice that spot market is shrinking even more, because we've got more dedicated, more regional freight, more dedicated trucks. And then, of course, you've got, what's happening in California with the changes in the vehicle designs over there and some of the regulations. It's just changing the dynamics of the long haul freight market.
Makes sense. Right. It makes sense. I mean, we got these changes occur all the time, and we got to adopt to them. And I mean, I think shippers have got a lot smarter at shipping.
Oh yeah.
They're a lot more organized. They understand their break points. They understand what's the best format. Like, how many units do I have to ship in order to maximize my shipping costs, which I think is great.
Yes.
Because efficiencies are getting better. And if you're that logistics supplier for your customers that can increase and help efficiencies get better, you're winning, right? And everybody's winning. And it's, people are locking in capacity. They're locking in the ability. I mean, every one of my customers is already talking about, okay, what's your capacity look like in February? And let's start setting it up, because things are going to start rolling. But as things start rolling and as people leave, you know what I mean? You're doing this crisscross again. And it is, guys, we talk about this all the time. This is not abnormal in our industry.
Not at all.
This is normal.
Not at all.
It's just, I think we've been on bigger roller coasters over the last couple of years, as opposed to, the mini ones that you would get at like a local fair. Now we're at like a Six Flags kind of situation. And, just, it's different, right? So when it's different, people react. I'm not even going to say respond. They react in a much different way.
I think the problem, Dan, to your point, is that we get so involved in what we're doing the day to day that sometimes we lose focus on the most important things of gaining that knowledge of what we're talking about right now. Because, depending upon the size of your operation, you get engulfed in that, you get entrenched in it. You have no time to talk to salespeople, or sometimes not even your team, because you've got your own priorities that have to be taken care of.
Right.
Yep.
And those are the things where it's like, I didn't think of that. That's why us as salespeople, as logisticians, have to bring that to the forefront, and let them know what the hell is going on and why it's so important that if you didn't think of this, you better think of this, because it may not hit you now, but it's going to kick you in the ass later on if you start preparing.
Yep. Awesome. Do we have anything else, boys? We've been on 42 minutes here, and I don't feel like we've covered very much.
We have.
I thought we did. I mean, I think it was very informative. I think this was one of the most fun podcasts that we've had in a while, not just knowledge based, but what we were talking about, AI and all this other kind of stuff. It kind of just all came together and just made a lot of sense. A lot of sense.
Yeah. You guys just buffed me there. That was I agree. This was a good show.
It was.
I'll be coming at you from down under next week.
Yeah, so I was just about to mention that. Dean, Dean, are you going to have like a spot outside where we get to see a little bit of Australia? You're going to have some fun clips for us and stuff?
I could. Yeah, absolutely. Where I'll be at my mum's house, though, there's not a lot of great views, but there'll be a few gum trees and magpies, and you'll hear what you'll hopefully hear is the silence. So if you said, what's the big difference between Australia and the US? It's the fact that you can hear nothing in Australia. Like, because it's so big, this like silence is it just hits you in the face. And at night, the Milky Way, because there's very little light pollution, the stars are
beautiful,
amazing.
It's got to be amazing.
Yeah, you got to take some video for us to show on the show next week, because and I mean, you know what, Dean, just shout out to you, brother, for going all the way to Australia and saying, you know what, we're still going to do the show.
It'll be early night, but hey, I will send you some pictures you've already probably got them in your email inbox, a couple of slides we can show next week of what trucks look like. And and we could talk about this on the show, because I've done a comparison of Australian trucks to American trucks and figured out the amount of ton per linear feet between the two countries, because Australian trucks are far more productive for the same length of a US 18-wheeler. It's not quite apples and apples. It's because Australian trucks are 22-wheelers, standard trucks here with our 18-wheelers. So it's a little bit different, but they're shorter and carry a lot more weight per foot of trailer length. So
let's do it.
Triple axles, aren't they? Most of them
are all triaxles. No spreads. Spreads went out in the 80s. All triaxle dollies, triaxles. But you can run
long trains.
From my experience, I drove a 9-axle B train for many years in Australia. I can get a 9-axle B train with 34 pallets on in more places than an 18-wheeler can with a big hood. with one trailer. So they're far more maneuverable. And of course, the Australian B train came from the Canadian B train in the 70s. Was designed a little bit different than the Canadian B train, which was the initial design of what became the B double. The difference with the Canadian B trains is they had two trailers the same length. Right? I don't know if you remember that.
Well, Canadians are fart smellers. I mean, smart fellers. I got to tell you that right now. Right? So we Canadians, man, we're all over it, eh?
Yeah. Hey.
Hey. You guys got to watch. You guys got to watch.
We better cut the show now while we're good.
Yeah. We better cut the show before Dan goes on a tangent with a Canadian, eh? But,
so as we say in Australia, we'll see you when the mud dries.
That's it. Exactly.
You have a good complexion later on. So
what you should say is, I hope it rains forever.
That's right. Yeah.
All
right, gentlemen. Well,
until
Dean,
next week.
safe travels, buddy, and we'll be seeing you next week. Jeffrey, keep it short. I mean, the mustache. I think it looks awesome.
Always.
Yeah. I wasn't talking about you in general. I like when you talk. It was more the mustache, brother. It's all good. Everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Audacious out.
Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah.